this set of conversations was around how do we get people who are doing incredible work to talk to each other? How do we create context for them to have a conversation that's productive? And then how do we sort of really document, learn from, listen to what they have to say?
I think that it's intentional to send our kids to, and our young people and our family members to prison because it builds the economy, right? So the privatization of prisons and that growing prison industrial complex fuels, I think, the political will not to improve schools, but to lock us up. So, I mean, I think that's another political context that's a little bit different then and now.
We also have a white paper or briefing or something that's coming out actually in a couple of weeks with the Alliance for Educational Justice and the Gay Straight Alliance that is really targeting the issue of it's the intersection of the school to prison pipeline and LGBTQ issues in schools with kind of like the idea that we wanted to frame the issue so that the bullying piece doesn't do what you were talking about, doesn't, you know, move us over into we need zero tolerance in order to deal with this. We're seeing a growth in the number of groups that are taking on this issue across the country and a change in discourse with stakeholders, including the teachers' unions. We've been in discussions with NEA and AFT because at the national level they have, you know, pretty good language about what they believe in, but unfortunately it doesn't trickle down. So we're working with them to get folks on board with a different way of doing discipline that doesn't criminalize young people of color. So I will stop there.
And one of those individuals we had a conversation with was Andrew Walt. And Andrew, and I'll allow him to tell his own story, but Andrew came to us from a social entrepreneurial perspective. How do you merge the different sectors of both nonprofit, business models, but also how do you also bring that into accountability measures that people will also be able to see the impacts and the effects in which you want to see in the work that we're talking about, because that's all foundations talk about now. Sean keeps joking about Roy. He keeps talking about, you know, Obama talking about taking care of Roy. And he's like, what's Roy? Who's Roy? He's like, return on investment. And I was like, I'm thinking he's talking about his cousin Roy or something. So we're talking about Roy. Leadership STEM Institute was about Roy. And Sean was like, he stole my joke.
So the lens I wanted to put on those two approaches is that we are coming to the Leadership and Sustainable Institute with a very particular perspective, in that in all the work that we did, we found that when we were doing our work with an organization, what we were implicitly doing is actually building leadership. By the fact that they were going through a relatively rigorous process, that by working with those leaders, but working with them in the context of how they developed their organization, we were building those leaders. And then we went out and we did this research study.
Right, but there's been investments in AFI to create that space and you know, within its affinity group around the work targeting black men and boys, but then also there's this broader set, right, around healthy men, healthy communities that, you know, grant makers for children, youth, and families, right? And so how are those, you know what I mean, but then at the same time, you know, what is the collective of the investment in sort of, you know, HMHC, you know, ADFI, and Foundation Center, which I don't think we've always put in that pot, but is in that pot, right? But then also, what are the gaps as well? We have to think of the infrastructure piece, because you'll learn about what Foundation's doing on other panels. I promise you that's how it happens.
What we're struggling with now is, you know, how to include a focus on boys and men of color across the whole programmatic effort of the foundation. So it really gets to the tension that Robert raised earlier, which is, you know, you're trying to program kind of a structural issue. And I think we're getting closer, but the key, I think, for us is certainly figuring out how to make sure there's accountability mechanisms internally. And one of the things that it's actually playing out in our organization is having clear metrics around boys and men of color impact at least from the strategy perspective, across the whole foundation. So it's going to be in Bob Ross's CEO goals that the board's going to hold them accountable to. It's going to be in the evaluation across our 3 programmatic priorities. We're still working that out, but it's going to be structurally in the strategic plan. The question is, when the plan is over, right, 10 years later, when Ross is gone, does the endowment continually have this perspective?
I think there are more people out there in our field that would move this work if they were supported in doing so. Mm-hmm. Every foundation that we talk to, we do this training where it says, okay, now what? Now what do we do? And we still have the capacity in the field to support the folks that want to do this work.
One quick thing about when you said that, like he and there's not a whole lot, who are the CEOs who sort of feel it and get it, and Natasha knows I'm beating a dead horse on this. We have not created a space where for the ones who do feel it to be in the same way. I can name through the ones who are, and they're all really, really busy people, but like, who creates that space, right? Because, you know what I mean? Because he's more encouraged in that, this bold thing he's doing in that study lead, in knowing who some of the partners are to be, who already could be thought partners. And that what he learns could not just benefit him, but some peers who already get it, and some peers who he'll help move along. And so,
so these are essentially some of the questions that we want to answer today. How are boys and young men of color being framed in the news media? And I think you could just even do this and just say, how are boys and young men of color being framed in the media? It could be entertainment, it could be gaming, it could be the news media, etc. How can we reframe the conversation to build public support for efforts to invest in young men of color? What can we do to make sure that our frames take hold? And how do we get the media to cover our issues?
Content. Most of us, I think, have some sort of online presence, right? I have a website, for instance, a blog called New Black Man, and so I'm always searching for content. One of the reasons why I was interested in Studology 101, right, because these websites have to be dynamic. If we're not presenting new content on websites on a daily basis, folks don't come to the websites. You increase traffic by making sure that the content is dynamic. So you're always in this need for content, right? And you see this on Twitter. Folks on Twitter are always looking for content. They're hungry for that. And so what happens is when you get folks who are doing incredible content, and YouTube allows you to embed anything, so it allows you to share that content, which not only brings traffic to your own individual site, but it also allows you to celebrate quality work that's out there and get that to audiences that, say, Studology might not be able to reach.
I was going to say, it all depends on what the content is. Is it the kind of thing that somebody would, people don't just share any old video.
Yeah,
We were all kind of talking about the medium and not the message. I think what kids have that we don't have is they know what other young people will be willing to consume.
Right.
You knew what
Right.
other people would do. You kid too.
Right.
You knew what other people would but you knew that when, or somebody knew when they did the thing 50 Cent Barack, somebody knew this is going to be the kind of thing that young people are going to love.
Yeah.
So it depends on how it's interior, bite size, but it's not just the size. It's what's the message? And so it doesn't, all this stuff will work integrated together, and I think that it is driven by a younger demographic, but it's not the messenger, it's the message.
Really wanted to give people real space to talk and build and argue and think and battle and set a collective vision.